I think today fuchsias are rather underrated. They're great garden plants with a long season of flowering from late spring, early summer, right the way through to the frosts. They come in two distinct kinds. The hardy type, like this one, which can spend their entire life outdoors. They get cut back a bit by the cold weather in winter, but then you can prune them and the rootstock and the majority of the branches will come back. Others are tender and they won't take frost and they need to be overwintered indoors. But when you get a hardy fuchsia like this and you think, she's doing really well, you can see the flower buds on it. It's had a great flush of flowering, second one coming. I could do with a few more of these in my garden. And the great thing about fuchsias, whether hardy or tender, is they produce lots of cutting material like this. Look for shoots which don't really have any flower buds on the end, only because you want them to concentrate on forming roots and not spend their energy making flowers. So shoots like this, that have got lots of flowers on and more flower buds coming at the end, avoid those and instead cut off some of these youngsters. They don't need to be terribly long. There's another. Made all my cuts just above a leaf joint so there's no stem to die back. And I've got my handful of cutting material. Now the astonishing thing about fuchsias from cuttings is that you can root the tiniest bit of them. Mostly when we're doing pelargonium cuttings, geranium cuttings, they're about that long, 3 or 4 inches. With fuchsias, they can really be quite tiny, not much more than 1 inch long. And if I show you what I can do here, I'm just going to take those leaves off there with my sharp knife. And believe it or not, making the cut just underneath that leaf joint there, that is a fuchsia cutting. But if you get nervous and you worry, oh, if I don't water that pot for one day, that's going to dry out, don't be too frightened to make them slightly longer. So you can go down a little bit further. And this cutting here, I'll take there. So it's that little bit longer. There's no rule, when you're making these. It's just the material you've got. And that seems the right length for that one and that for that one. And I'll just work my way through until I've got half a dozen that I can sit in my pot. If I made the cut there, internodally between 2 leaf joints, there's a great temptation for that to rot back as far as the node of the leaf joint. So there's a greater concentration of rooting hormones at the leaf joint. So always, any kind of cutting, almost any kind of cutting. Sometimes I do clematis as internodal cuttings, but those are perfect little fuchsia cuttings. Then it's a matter of just inserting them around the edge of a pot. Why around the edge? Well, drainage is always fiercest on the edge of a pot, and this is just an ordinary, with multi-holes in the bottom, plastic pot filled with compost that's peat-free, but I've put perlite into it, which just makes it that much more open and free draining. Cuttings hate to be soggy while they're rooting. They don't want to dry out, but similarly they shouldn't be soggy. I don't always use hormone rooting powder, but if you're a belt and braces sort of person, you think, well, I might as well, I've got some. Don't cake them in the stuff, just dip the edge in, tap it, and then insert them around the edge of the pot. I'm not burying them too deeply. The bottom leaves on the cutting want to be just above the surface of the compost in the pot. And now, because they're so tiny and they could dry out really well, first of all, water them in to give them a really good soak, and that will settle the compost around the stem. I've been quite generous until it, as you can see, it's running out the bottom. You can either put a polythene bag over the top of the pot, or these are so good, such good value, they last for years. Seed tray on the bottom, that goes in there, that goes over the top, and you've got what the Victorians used to call a closed case, and it just keeps the moisture in. If it does get too hot, you've got a little ventilator on the top. Now I'll leave a bit of air in that for now, but then as soon as it starts getting a bit cooler, it doesn't need much heat, but it will allow them to stay humid until they start to root, and they start to grow away, and then you'll think, oh, I think they've rooted. Tap the pot out just to see if you can see roots. If there aren't that many there yet, slip that root ball back in and keep it going for a little bit longer. But then as soon as they're rooted, you can pot them up individually, and hey presto, 5 new plants from my fuchsia. And there is one other thing. You think you'll remember what variety it is. You won't. Fuchsia Genie. Label every single pot. Grow well, little cuttings.